Good morning. Today is Monday, January 4th, and I'm coming to you from my camp out in the woods, and I'm in my hammock. It's one of my favorite spots to read the Bible and pray and meditate. And being in nature really lends itself to reading this beginning of Genesis. So today, January 4th, Monday, January 4th, we're in the fourth chapter of the book of Genesis. And we read this disturbing story. And it starts out nice. If we don't know the story ahead of time, it starts out nice. You get this idea that the man and the woman that God put on the earth have had children, which is great, right? They have Cain and Abel. And then we have the first violence. Um, Jealousy leads to confrontation, which erupts into violence. And God is just such a anthropomorphic figure here. We know this is the J voice. This is God asking questions of humankind. Where's your brother? Yeah, and then we have that statement. I think that we use a lot in our culture. Am I my brother's keeper, or am I my brother's babysitter? Which is what the Message translation says. And I know that's, I guess it's one thing we say to shirk off responsibility, but it's really what Cain says to get God off the trail of what he had done to his brother. So it's part of Cain's cover up. He doesn't want God to know that he killed his brother, and of course God's going to find out. um, but so you have this scenario of Cain and Abel, but we find out if we read the whole fourth chapter that Adam and Eve had three sons, and they have Seth after this interlude. And you know what? It tells us all the generations that come after Cain, and it identifies some of Cain's ancestors more so than others. So you have like three generations, you get the names of the sons, the fathers and the sons. And then you have Lamech. And Lamech has two wives, and they get names. And three children. And they are the head of the herdsmen and the head of the music guild, and then the head of the what looks like to be the blacksmiths or metalsmiths. And so you have these three characters, sons of Lamech, that are the ancestors of these trades, basically. And I don't know why it's like that. It's just a very strange thing. And others are, mentioned there. But one thing I did notice was that Seth's son is Enosh. Maybe it's Enoch. Seth's son is Enoch, and Cain's son is Enosh. I mean, I may be getting that wrong. I need to check the scripture. But I thought those were interesting names. You hear Seth as a name, you hear Cain, you hear Abel and Adam, but Enosh just didn't capture anyone's imagination. Um, yeah, you have it. It's very strange. Enoch was the first son of Cain that he conceived with his wife, who still has no name, and and then the first son of Seth, which they would be cousins, is Enosh. And and the very end of the chapter says that's when men and women began praying and worshiping the name of God. So you have this voice is from the Yahwist, Yahweh, it's the name of God. And then in German it's spelled with a J because they don't have a Y in German, so it's called the J perspective. And God is this anthropomorphic figure, this human-like God. And it's almost as if the editor was going through and going, okay, we'll give a little bit of priest, and then we'll go back and we'll give a little bit of J. And then they got tired and said, just put a whole bunch of J in here. Just like leave the J part. So this is the stories of these generations and how they got planted on the earth. There aren't as many good narratives in these chapters. So we will be getting later on to the story of Abraham and Isaac and Rebekah, and then their son was Jacob, and all the stories about Jacob, and then Jacob had so many sons, and Jacob and working for Laban and marrying Leah, then staying around to marry Rachel, and there's just really good stories in Genesis, just not quite right here. But there are some strange names. So Enosh and Enoch. Um, very, very interesting things. And I'm wondering why we don't name our kids Enosh and Enoch. They sound kind of easy to spell and normal, but sort of foregone that. Some things have good meanings and others have not so good meanings. The relationship, though, of humankind to God that's displayed in chapter 4 is very intimate. Um, it's almost like there's a closer, even footing between the divine and the human in this scenario, this story, that how it plays out with God and the brothers, the sons of Adam. And what I think about when I reflect on that to like for my own life is that God is ever present, ever near, and ever kind of God's. I think God's present in that conscience that we have. You know, that little Jiminy Cricket voice that says, "Where's your brother? What's your motivation? Why? Why do you feel as if you know you're going to sin here? You know this." And that's what God sort of had this conversation with Cain, and is almost like a therapist, like saying, trying to draw out Cain's deeper motives and see if he can counsel Cain through this. Um, but then there's the theology that says that God is all knowing, God is all powerful. Can God make a rock bigger than God can move? You know, this, so if there's that transcendent God that exists as well, and I really believe that even though we can't contain that all in our minds, that is that is the God we worship and pray to, because it's both and. It's not just a God that's anthropomorphic that asks us questions and tries to get at our motives, but it's also a God that can put the stars in the sky and creates our bodies so that they can heal themselves when we get a paper cut. And that made us all to have these individual fingerprints like snowflakes. And maybe it's more reflective when I'm out here in the woods, but it's God. God also is in the relationships that give us life. And God, we hear this say all the time, God is love. And those emotions that we have towards one another, God meant for us to be in communication and in relationship with each other. And God is the glue that holds that together. That's the love. So it's just in the air and in the trees and in the people and in the hearts and in the minds. God is here. And as the pandemic increases, as we develop this new strain that's even made it to our shores in Florida, God is present. God is somewhere. I hope you'll have a day where you can seek the Lord.